Hey Liz, hey Rodri,
Hey, Fran. Hey, Rodri.
Hey Liz, hey friend.
and hi everybody. As we here at BioEarth think together along with you about the vast challenges that climate change will bring to us, and soon, we realize that it will take broad cooperation across nations, religious denominations, political divisions, and we want to start today by pointing out something that we think is an obstacle to that, which is outrage culture. Outrage is different than anger. It is a response to anger. Outrage is that public, reactionary, moral judgment and anger directed at those with whom we disagree. We know that as we go forward in doing this work, that there is a lot to be angry about, and that anger can be an important tool that fuels change of systems that promote greed or consumption or materialism. But outrage creates division. It splits apart communities, it can split apart families and friendships, and we don't exist as a separate individual. Remember, we are part of an ecosystem, but we're part of a human ecosystem as well. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist thinker, explains that if you look at a flower, you see it and you think, oh, this is a separately existing thing, but it isn't, because it has water, it exists in the soil, it has air in its cells, and all of us exist in relationship to everything else around us. And so I think that's the problem, and why outrage leaves us feeling so exhausted and isolated. We are three imperfect people who've made mistakes, and we recognize that those around us also make mistakes.
Fran, I think that's super powerful to sit with when we think about how exhausting and draining participation in outrage culture is. And I think a lot of that's because the foundation of outrage culture is really shame. You know, we spend a lot of time projecting shame in these very loud ways. And there's violence in the act of shaming ourselves and each other. And I think that we're underestimating the impact of that violence in our interconnected root system that is this ecological whole we participate in. And so one of the thinkers that I draw from is Brene Brown, who speaks a lot about the impacts of shame on the self and also on communities and collectives. And, Brene Brown has been talked about quite a bit, so I don't need to introduce all of her principles here, but the thing that really jumps out to me is the way that shame really blocks us from connecting and learning. And so the very act of shaming somebody prevents them from receiving the message you want to convey. So your argument, the impact of your action is actually to prevent the outcome you want. And so when you're reflecting on, and when I'm reflecting on how to impact change and how to be an agent of change, I really think about what mechanisms create openings, what energetic behaviors create openings, what questions create openings. How do we engage with curiosity and celebrate and understand that we're all works in progress? And I think that that is so key when we're talking about paradigm shifting. And I also draw a lot from another thinker named Eamon Malouf, who wrote a really powerful book called In the Name of Identity. And it's another one that I keep on my altar most days. And really, this book guided a lot of my understandings about how moving too quickly or from a state of fear creates these binaries and these constructs that prevent us from connection. And what that looks like is identifying somebody based on one or a few aspects of their identity instead of seeing them as this diverse ecosystem of existence, like Fran was articulating. And so this text really talks about the way that those acts of honing in on singular parts of someone's identity lead to dehumanization and ultimately to violence, which is a context that we really need to be attentive to right now. It is our responsibility to steward peace in our communities and to activate justice in one another and in ourselves. And in order to do that, we have to stop perpetuating violence, even emotional, energetic violence. And to do that, we have to start internally. We have to start with understanding why we're feeling these surges of outrage and why that shows up as blame and accusation as opposed to creativity, conversation, and understanding. And so those are some of the, things that come up for me when I think about this. And I would love to hear from Rodrigue some more about the context of outrage culture, and also just what some skills are that we could work with to tackle this.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And by the way, I like Brené Brown, and I think she's powerful. And also, the first thing that comes to my mind is blame. Is who got to pay for this, right? And who's the reason why this happens? And it's the person. We don't even look at the actions. We look at the person and the individual, the human being, as being the problem. And I think that's where our mind has to shift, right? From seeing whatever happens and kind of pasting it onto someone versus looking at the wrong, the issue as a separate thing from the person, the human being, as an action, and not the human being himself or herself. So I like to always reflect on restorative justice practice, which for me just means, focusing on the person versus the wrong. Like, how do we put ourselves in the person's perspective? What was happening? What happened before? Why did the person do this? Why would they react this way versus, oh, he did this, he needs punishment, he needs to pay for this, and so on and so forth. So I'm one of the people that I would refer to is Zaire, who is, we call him the father of restorative justice. And Howard Zaire, he's a professor of restorative justice, and I've been happy to spend some space with him when he talked about his work, and he taught me some of his work. And so really, we all are human beings, and we are nature. We have our mistakes, as Francis just said at the beginning. We're imperfect human beings, so we can make a lot of mistakes. When one put themselves in that situation of saying, well, I also make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. So we should not be like, this person is wrong, it's evil, it's bad, we can't talk to this person should be called out, versus, oh, he did a mistake. So how do we organize around not supporting the rhetoric around shame, around pushing people into the limit, saying that they're bad, everybody tweeting? If you go on Twitter now, everybody tweeting from each side, and you go on Facebook, same thing. If anything happens, they blame specific people, like I blame this person and this person and that person and that person for this. But how do we make it so that we help those people who have made mistakes ourselves? When we make mistake, we get to the point where we say, okay, we made a mistake, but as human beings, what can we do to correct, to reverse the mistake, or to move a different direction? And that's where the beginning is. I think the beginning is looking at other people as ourselves, human beings who make mistakes, and how do we together move forward to correcting or fixing the mistake, and taking a different approach, better approach, positive approach for positive change. That is with human beings. If we put people aside, we're not going to get to that goal. So everybody has to play a role. We have to bring everybody to the table. Those who make mistakes, those who haven't made mistake yet, and it's some point, and they will not be happy to be put aside or to be, demonized.
And I also, in terms of that invitation in, there is this this impulse to move quickly, as if the problem will only be there for the beat in which you observe it. And if you don't attack it at that moment, you've missed the opportunity. And I would really reflect more, I think, on slowing down and the idea that truth is not an object or a moment. Truth is an unfolding, and it's something that needs to be brought forward and received. Truth is something that needs to be dialogued. And I'd also say that there is radical love in sitting with somebody you disagree with and hearing them and asking questions. But that does not mean being boundaryless in that listening. It is okay to set boundaries and assert values and push back against things you don't feel are based in compassion or critical thinking. Those both can coexist. We're not in a binary world where you can either call out or give up. That is such a limited perspective, and honestly, a tool that prevents us from creating real and sustainable change. Part of the kind of act of slowing down is really, I think, understanding and reflecting on how outrage and outrage culture is violent. And this idea that we really treat outrage culture as a playground and we don't really take it very seriously. And I would really pose the question of our team, how does that violence show up in communities when we dehumanize one another? What does that actual outcome look like in terms of violence?
To avoid violence, we have to think of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the problem. But what about the person? What about the actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the positive sides of this person? How is the person feeling? What was the motive around his actions? What has he experienced in the past to get to that level?
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking through those questions, we can come back to saying, well, this is a problem, this is the action, but we don't have to be radical, right? We have to be passionate about what happened. We have to approach the person, we have to heal that person so that it heals us and it heals our communities. Each single person that is healed, it's a whole community that we heal in our communities. So we have to think about it. His family will be healed, if it's someone who has kids and a wife or a husband and family, they will be healed. The people that they're connected to will be healed. And the society will be shifting to a positive change when we focus on relationship building, healing, and restoring the positive aspects of each one's life. Civil war can happen quickly when there is no tolerance, and these culture that we are just mentioning here today could lead to very damaging situations, even in the United States after the elections. And all this is because there are a lot of rhetorics on social media, on the medias and everywhere that people continue to perpetrate, and which make people feel that there is a need to protect themselves, to defend themselves, to stand against another group. And that is not the way to go, right? I think the way to go is, how do we live in harmony as a community, right? If we don't agree with one action, so what are the many other means to finding solutions? I don't think we have only one way to get to a solution. We always have many options in front of us to the solution. Dialogue, conversations, community groups, discussions, or anything like that could allow us to get to a point where we understand why people are feeling frustrated, why people are feeling angry, why do we feel angry, why do we want to respond this way, what is that thing that is putting us to this position, and how can we avoid that position by using other means.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Rooted Conversations. We'll be back next week with some new seed ideas, and we're really feeling that this was a regenerative time together. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.